I'm not coming to some cheap little barbecue you're calling a wedding, my mother scoffed, flicking her designer sunglasses down just enough to let her disgust show. A backyard wedding? That's for poor people. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I swallowed the sting in my throat and blinked fast to hide the shimmer in my eyes. I was standing on the porch of my fiancé's modest two-bedroom home in upstate New York, clutching the DIY floral invitation I had printed at a local Staples. It was soft pink, my favorite color, with pressed wildflowers glued in the corners, each glued by hand. I wanted you there, I said quietly. I'm your daughter. Dad didn't even let me finish. He stepped forward, his voice hard. You're an embarrassment to us, Mia. This isn't a wedding. It's a joke. My hands trembled, and not just because the October wind was cruel. Behind me, my fiancé Caleb was stacking folding chairs in the backyard, still wearing the grease-stained overalls from his auto repair shop job. He turned when he heard the voices, catching my father's glare before I could even respond. And he's a mechanic? Dad hissed. After everything we sacrificed for you to go to college? You end up with a grease monkey and a backyard ceremony? This is how you repay us. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I wasn't angry, not yet. It was something deeper, something more bitter than fury. It was grief. Then don't come, I said, my voice barely steady. If your love for me is conditional on a chandelier and 5-star catering, then stay home. They turned without another word. No hug. No blessing. No offer of help. Just expensive perfume lingering in the air and the finality of tires crunching down the gravel road. That night, I cried in Caleb's arms, quietly, so our neighbors wouldn't hear. He held me close, his rough hands wiping my tears, his jaw clenched. You still want to do this? He asked. We can fly to Vegas instead. No pressure, no pain. But I shook my head. I want this. Us. Right here. Even if no one shows. The wedding day came. And, at first, no one did show. Just Caleb's sweet Aunt Denise with her homemade apple pie, his old high school friend Marcus with a Bluetooth speaker, and our neighbor Nora, who lent us her string lights. We made an altar under the oak tree, where Caleb carved our initials. The grass was damp, but the sky was clear. And when Caleb said, I do, with his hand slightly shaking and his voice breaking just a little on the word forever, I knew I didn't need a ballroom. I needed this. But what none of us expected was the man with the camera. A soft-spoken stranger with a beard and warm eyes had been invited by Marcus last minute. He's a freelance filmmaker, Marcus had shrugged. Just wants to practice wedding reels. We said yes. And that decision, that one yes, was the thread that unraveled everything. Because 7 days later, that same man uploaded a video to YouTube titled, The Most Beautiful Backyard Wedding You'll Ever See. And in 48 hours, it hit 5.6 million views. Not because of the location. Not because of the decorations. But because of a single 23-second clip. Me, in a simple white dress from a thrift shop, choking on tears, holding Caleb's hands under that oak tree, saying, I didn't have my parents here today, but I have love. And I think that's more than money can ever buy. People didn't just watch, they shared. They wept. They posted comments like, This is the most real wedding I've ever seen. She deserved better from her family. I'm sobbing. This is what love looks like. And as it kept spreading from TikTok edits to talk shows, my parents saw it too. That's when the phone calls started. That's when they drove 2 hours to our town unannounced. That's when they knocked on our door, with red eyes, wet cheeks, and shaking hands. Mia, Mom cried. We made a mistake. And I just stood there holding the doorknob wondering, were they here for me now, or for the spotlight I'd become? My mother's mascara was running, and my father's shirt was wrinkled in a way I'd never seen before. These were people who once called arriving in anything less than a Mercedes tacky. Now, they stood at my doorstep like soaked strangers, not parents. Caleb stood behind me, one hand resting gently on my lower back. He said nothing, but I could feel his breath change, tense like mine. Mia, Mom whispered again, reaching out. Honey, we didn't know the wedding was going to be so beautiful. I blinked. That's what brought you back, I said. The aesthetic of it all? No, she said quickly. No. I mean, we saw the video. The part where you cried. It broke my heart. You said I was an embarrassment, I reminded her. My voice wasn't angry. It was just hollow. My father looked at the floor. We shouldn't have said that. I was upset. We thought you were settling. You deserve more. More? I tilted my head. Or just more expensive? They didn't answer. But the silence said everything. I wanted to scream. To throw open the door and drag them inside just so I could make them watch the love they called low class. I wanted to replay every moment they'd missed. Caleb whispering my vows back to me because I was too emotional to speak. Nora lighting the candles when the sun dipped early. The kiss we shared while autumn leaves danced around us like confetti. But instead, I just stepped outside and closed the door behind me. You know what I learned that day? I said, arms crossed against the cold. That a family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up. And you didn't. We made a mistake, Mia. My mom insisted, voice cracking. We were raised with a different mindset. Status mattered. Appearances mattered. But we watched that video, and you looked like a woman. Strong. Happy. Loved. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm proud of you. For a second, the words floated between us like a leaf not yet fallen. But it was too late. Proud? I asked quietly. You weren't proud when I graduated with honors. Or when I opened my own floral design business. You only showed up when the world showed up. Dad's voice trembled for the first time. We didn't think this would happen. You were always a quiet girl. You didn't chase attention. Now you're… What? Trending. I laughed softly. That's what it took? Suddenly Caleb opened the door behind me. He didn't say anything. Just slipped his jacket around my shoulders like I was made of glass. We should go, Dad murmured, pulling at Mom's sleeve. But she resisted. Please, Mia. Just one dinner. Let us talk properly. I met her eyes. She looked desperate. But it wasn't the desperation of a mother who missed her daughter. It was the desperation of someone locked out of a door she never thought she'd need to knock on. Maybe someday, I said. But not today. I'm still celebrating. And with that, I walked back inside. Caleb closed the door gently, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. He kissed the top of my head. Proud of you. I nodded, voice shaking. Me too. The next morning, we woke up to a text from Nora. Mia, turn on Channel 9. You're on Morning Light America. We flipped on the TV, and there I was. That same 23-second clip. Again. But this time, it wasn't just online. It was national. The anchor was crying. The producers had flown in to do a full segment. They called me the backyard bride who broke the internet. And before the week was over, 3 wedding magazines, 1 Hollywood screenwriter, and a morning show host had reached out. Suddenly, the world wanted to know me. But the question was, what would I do now that they did? The knock on our door this time didn't come with tears. It came with a car. A black SUV. Tinted windows. Parked across the street like it had been there since dawn. Caleb peered through the blinds and raised an eyebrow. We expecting someone famous? I laughed. At this point, maybe. The doorbell rang. When I opened it, a sharply dressed woman in her 30s stood on the porch. She had the kind of confidence that made you instinctively fix your posture. Mia Caldwell? She asked, smiling. I nodded cautiously. She extended a hand. I'm Tessa McMillan, producer for Good Morning Viewpoint. We'd like to fly you and your husband to LA this weekend. Full segment. National coverage. We think your story could inspire a lot of people. I blinked. She continued, we'll handle the flights, hotel, makeup, wardrobe, everything. We just want you to be yourself. The woman who stood under a tree and chose love over luxury. I was speechless. Caleb stepped up behind me, hand resting on the frame of the door. You serious? Tessa smiled. Dead serious. America needs a real love story. And you too? You're it. 3 days later, I was sitting in a makeup chair in a Los Angeles studio, staring at my reflection in disbelief. I wasn't wearing a $10 thrift store dress this time. I had a cream-colored silk blouse and my hair curled into soft waves. But my hands still trembled the same way. The host, a polished man with a sympathetic voice, greeted us warmly on air. America fell in love with Mia and Caleb's backyard wedding, he said into the camera. But what they didn't know was the why behind it. Today, we hear that story. I told them everything. Not the viral version, but the real one. The rejection. The ache. The dreams that didn't come with dollar signs. I told them about losing clients in my floral business because I couldn't afford advertising, how Caleb worked until midnight fixing engines in the freezing cold, how our wedding budget was less than most people's cake. But also how it felt when Caleb looked at me under that tree, like I was the richest woman alive. The segment aired the next morning. That same afternoon, I got 4,000 new emails. But it wasn't the numbers that shook me. It was who was writing. One message came from a woman in Kansas. My daughter wants to cancel her wedding because we can't afford a venue. After watching you, I told her we're doing it in our backyard. With love. Another from a man in Chicago. I haven't spoken to my sister in 10 years. After your story, I called her. Thank you. And then the one I never expected. From my little brother, Josh. They didn't come to your wedding. But I watched every second of it online. You were brave. I miss you.
Can I come see you?
I sat frozen for a moment, reading that line again. Caleb came up behind me and rubbed my shoulders. You okay? I think the world's shifting. He kissed the top of my head. Or maybe it's just finally seeing you clearly. That night, as we sat under fairy lights in our own backyard, this time with a few more friends, more food, more laughter, I realized something. The world had always seen money as the proof of success. But maybe the real success was standing here, arms wrapped around the man who never left my side, surrounded by strangers who now felt like family, with the sound of my phone buzzing in the background from a wedding planning app that just offered me a collaboration deal. Because now, I was becoming the story people looked to for hope. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing anyone's approval. They were chasing mine. 2 weeks after the segment aired, I found myself sitting in a downtown Manhattan cafe, sipping tea from a porcelain cup that cost more than my entire wedding dress. Across from me sat a woman named Julia Kendrick, CEO of a major bridal fashion label. She leaned forward, her designer coat barely rustling. We've seen your impact, Mia. People aren't just watching, you're changing the way they think about love, about weddings, about self-worth. And we'd like to offer you a brand partnership. I nearly choked on my tea. Me? I blinked. You're offering a sponsorship to the girl who wore a $38 dress and made her bouquet from backyard daisies? Julia smiled warmly.
Exactly.
Because you're real. And people are tired of curated, fake luxury. They want authenticity. And you, Mia Caldwell, you gave it to them without even trying. The offer was more than just dresses. It was a lifestyle campaign. A limited-run collection called Rooted in Love, inspired by backyard weddings, handmade florals, secondhand elegance. Caleb was stunned when I told him. He was in the garage, elbow deep in an old engine when I burst in and handed him the contract. He wiped his hands and scanned the pages. His brow furrowed. This number, is this how many zeros it's supposed to have? I laughed. Yes. He set the papers down slowly, then wrapped me in his arms with a deep, steady breath. I knew you were magic, he whispered. Now the rest of the world's just catching up. The campaign exploded. My story went from YouTube Reels to Billboard features, podcast interviews, even a guest panel at a wedding expo in Austin. And somehow, along the way, I became that girl, the symbol of love that didn't need chandeliers to be valid. But amid the lights and press came a letter. A thick envelope in cursive script. From my mother. I stared at it for an hour before opening it. Dear Mia, we watched your story again last night. All of it. I cried the whole way through. I don't have an excuse for the things I said. I won't pretend I wasn't cruel. I was wrong. I was wrong about Caleb, about the wedding, about you. We raised you to believe that love looked like champagne and silk, but you found something pure. And you've shown the whole country what it really means to choose love over image. If there's any space in your heart for us, even just a crack, we'd love to meet you and Caleb
Properly.
as your family, not your critics.
Love.
Mom. I sat in silence, the letter trembling in my hands. Caleb came up behind me. You okay? I don't know, I admitted. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive them. But it doesn't hurt as much anymore. He kissed my temple. That's because you built something stronger. A month later, I was speaking on a panel at an industry event in Chicago, in a room full of polished professionals, editors, and influencers. I wore a soft blue jumpsuit stitched by a local designer who followed me on TikTok. The stage lights warmed my face, but the words I spoke were steady and raw. I was told my love was less because it didn't come with linen napkins or a rooftop venue. But love doesn't need validation from price tags. My husband and I got married under a tree, surrounded by neighbors and plastic chairs. And somehow, that truth touched people more deeply than a $30,000 wedding ever could. People clapped. Some stood. But I wasn't speaking for applause. I was speaking for every girl who sat in her room wondering if she was enough. I was speaking for myself. When I finally decided to meet my parents again, it was Caleb who drove us to their house. I stepped out of the car slowly, heels crunching on the pavement. My heart wasn't heavy. It was steady, because I was no longer the woman they once dismissed. I had grown roots in the ground they thought was beneath them. They opened the door together, my mother looking thinner, my father quieter. No smugness, no perfume cloud, just humility and hope in their eyes. Mia, Mom breathed. You look beautiful. I nodded. Thanks. It's good to see you. There was an awkward silence. Then Dad cleared his throat. We made a huge mistake. I looked him in the eye.
Yes.
You did. He nodded, eyes glistening. I'm sorry. I turned to Caleb. He smiled gently, giving me the space to choose. And I chose kindness, not for them, but for myself. Let's talk, I said. We've got time. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to walk forward with power, even if the scars still sting. 3 months later, I was standing at the same oak tree where I once cried alone on my wedding day. But this time, there were lights strung through the branches.
A crowd.
Cameras. Music. Laughter. It wasn't a wedding. It was a celebration for the success of the Rooted in Love campaign, now a nationwide movement helping low-budget couples create dream weddings on their own terms. And I was the face of it all. Caleb stood beside me, arm wrapped around my waist. You still nervous around crowds? I smiled. Not anymore. Just then I noticed them, my parents, in the back, watching. Quiet, uncomfortable, but present. They didn't approach. They just stood there. And I was okay with that. Because now they were on the outside looking in. Not me. Later that night, I stood with a mic in hand and looked out at everyone, friends, strangers, couples inspired by my story. I once cried under this tree thinking I'd been abandoned, I said. Now, I see it as the place where everything began.
People clapped.
Caleb kissed my cheek. And I realized, sometimes, rejection is just redirection. And the life I built, without approval, without permission, was the most powerful answer I could ever give. I didn't need to prove them wrong. I just needed to live my truth. And now the whole world was listening.